So yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for having me here today. So I'm going to talk here about how this model of cryptography from Landauer's principle, and the first idea behind this. There's a switch on the side.
Maybe click the screen.
Yeah, so this is work that I've done when I was in Lugano with Stefan, and now I'm in. So the prologue is that the motivation behind this work is to study both cryptography and physics. So that the foundations of cryptography through physics and the foundation of physics through cryptography. And one way to illustrate the first motivation is this introduction in one paper of Joe Killian in 1988, where he introduced the Oblivious transfer as a universal primitive for a secure multi-party computation. And he says, suppose your netmail is being erratically censored by Captain Yossariah. And then he goes on and say, well, as information theorist, it's not necessarily a problem, because if, for example, when you send an email, you're sure that with probability exactly 1/2 the email will reach your recipient, the receiver, and otherwise the receiver will receive just a blank email. Then you can just send it, for example, many times or do error correction, and that's not really a problem. But then he goes further and he says, the question is, can it, where it is the censorship by Captain Yossariah, be turned around and used to your advantage? And what he had in mind is cryptography. And in a beautiful hold of aikido, what he does is he turns this fundamental restriction of Captain Yossariah into cryptography with information theoretic security. So this is well illustrated in this paper, but it's not the first time that this trick happens. It happens all the time in cryptography. And a good example is secret key establishment, where at the origin, well, it's a physical restriction where the suitcase was handcuffed to the ends of some diplomatic courier that was moving the one-time pads from one place to the other. And then in '84, Bernard Brassard used quantum mechanics to transform this kind of protocol into one that uses quantum mechanics, that use photons instead of people. And then it could be done with a device-independent quantum key distribution based on special relativity, which is another restriction, the no signaling principle. And what I want to think about was, can we do it with thermodynamics? And now, yeah, I will soon explain why thermodynamics is illustrated by this little demon with particles. So the first lesson here was that, yeah, we can turn restriction into cryptography, but it's also, so it's a sufficient condition, but it's also necessary, because if we want to have information theoretic security, for example, for encryption, there's one way to do it, and it's a one-time pad, which means that it's robust against cryptographic attack using computers of unbounded computation time. And then there's this quote of Van Neumann that I kind of defaced. It says, anyone who considers arithmetical method of producing random digit is, of course, in a state of sin. And then for a one-time pad, well, we can change producing for distributing. And we kind of need to set the ground of cryptographical security on some restriction, fundamental restriction, mainly physical. The second motivation of this work was to use cryptography as a lens to look into what kind of physical worlds are possible and what kind of information theoretic principles can we use to describe our world. And yeah, this is a picture in Micropia. So yeah, to summarize, this work is doing some link between reversible computing and information and cryptography. And my outline will be, I will first talk about reversible computing. Then I will describe this bounded free energy model that I built inside this framework of reversible computing. And then I'll finish with some protocols and some proofs of some examples of cryptography that we can do in this model, in the information theoretic secure way. So first, reversible computing. So reversible computing is a beautiful example of how information entered the domains of physics. And I'll also explain physical phenomena that kind of were left out of physics. And the best example is the one of Maxwell's demon, which was a paradox for many years before it was finally solved. And one modern interpretation, retelling of this paradox is that we start with Maxwell demons, which has a box, a container with gas particles. And in the middle of the container, he puts a wall and a little door. And then the demon will activate the door. And more precisely, what he will do is that when a particle wants to go from right to left, he's going to open the door and let the particle in. And when the particle will try to move from left to right, he will quickly close the door and prohibit the particle from going from right. When he does this for a while, eventually all the particles end up on the left side, and there's a void on the right side. Now the demon can use this void to install a piston in the middle and extract some work by doing expansion of the gas, control expansion. So he extracts some work, and then he removes the wall, and we're back at the state that we were at the step one. And some work has been extracted. So doing it once, okay, but what happens if you do it an unbounded number of times? Well, you can have free work, unlimited free work, and this is in violation of the second law of thermodynamics because it's a perpetuum mobile of the second kind. And the way out of this was found by Bennett, and or actually refound because it was actually discovered before, but then forgotten. I think Zillard. Yeah, Bennett said this at my defense.
I said Zillard. It was another name. I think it was another name. It was a name I had never heard.
I just remember that he said that it was obfuscated by von Neumann, and this is why it was forgotten. Because von Neumann had so much weight that he discarded the right explanation, and then no one thought about it until Bennett refound it. Okay, but what's the trick here? It's to look at what exactly happens in the brain of the demon during this process. So let's say that the brain of the demon starts in a blank state, represented by a string of 0. When he's gonna open or close the door to let the particles in, you need to look at the particle to see if it's on the left going to the right or on the right going to the left. And when he does this, he will capture this information in his brain, and then will operate the door depending on this information. But once the particles are all on the left, this information has disappeared from the physical system, and it only remains in the brain of the demon. So the brain.
Just sorry, the name is Smolkovsky.
And so the brain of the demon has been effectively randomized by this procedure, such that at the end of the third step, the gas is back at its original state, but the brain of the demon is not. The brain of the demon has been randomized. So if you want to really close the circle, we need to erase the brain of the demon. And this has a fundamental cost given by Landauer's principle. So, and it's proportional to the length of the string to be erased. And this cost is, in the best case, exactly, is at the minimum the cost of the work that was extracted in step 2. So in the end, nothing is gained. In the best case scenario, no work was produced.
Next question. I mean, it always bothers me. What about the energy it costs to open and close the door?
So we assume that it can be made arbitrarily small by having doors that have no friction. And then you put a little bit of momentum to start the movement, and then a little bit of, you recover the momentum by stopping the door.
Like a hybrid car.
Yeah.
If you have a car like that, I'm going to buy it.
Yes, so these are obviously impractical, but they are testing, okay, there is nothing fundamental in physics that prohibits the demon from doing this.
But, you know, if I look at your formula, there's also temperature, that is the temperature of the gas. But like, does it mean that the brain of the demon has a certain temperature as well, which is the same as the gas? Like,
yeah, so for Landauer's principle, the cost will be the cost of the string to be erased. So if the string of the demon is at a different temperature than the one in the gas, the erasure cost will be different. So doing the operation once can be beneficial. For example, if the brain of the demon is really cold and the gas is really hot, but you can do it only one. You cannot do the cycle.
The brain will heat up.
You can make like a Carnot process if you have two reservoirs, right? The gas is warm.
Yeah, but in the end, what you're doing is you're just transforming heat from a hot bath to a cold bath and extracting work. But yeah, good question. So here the temperature is really the one of the brain of the demon in this case.
There's an article by Schumacher, Ben Schumacher, it's called Demonic Heat Engine.
And this brings us to reversible computing. So what kind of operation were we allowing the daemon to do? Where we were allowing the daemon to do any kind of computation, as long as it was not erasing information for free. And this reversible computing has been shown to be logically universal, meaning that, for example, using Toffoli or Fredkin gate, you can transform any circuit into any irreversible circuit using and a NOT gate, for example, into a reversible circuit. And it's the same for Turing machine. It's possible to define Turing machines such that they never erase information. And another thing that was proven by Toffoli and Fredkin is that in theory, it's possible to make a computer that if the computer is doing some logically reversible computation, so reversible computing, it's possible to do it in a way that is thermodynamically reversible, meaning that has arbitrarily low energy cost, which is in the same spirit as opening the door of the daemon and closing it. We need some energy to move the system, but it can be arbitrarily low. So in the end, reversible computing, you never erase any information, and if you do not erase any information, you can do it for arbitrarily low cost. And this is what we assume the daemon is doing. This kind of computation. And I'll give one quick example of copying. So here, A1, A2, A3, A4 represent arbitrary bit of information. So we assume that these boxes contain entropy, and they're just numbered to keep track of the box. While on the bottom, it's a complete zero string, which has no entropy. Now it's possible to go from the left to the right for free. We're just doing a CNOT operation, which is logically reversible, therefore, thermodynamically reversible. But it's possible to do it thermodynamically reversible. But if we had the same string A1, A2, A3, A4, but we wanted to copy it to a completely random string, then it wouldn't be able to do it for free because we first need to erase. One way to see it is that we first need to erase this information and then to copy it. or we do it in one step, but in the end, these question marks, this information is gone. So this can't be done. And then the lesson of this is that redundancy has a cost or value, depending on how you see it. And the length of the zero string can be seen as a proxy for free energy, in the sense that if in the daemon, in the scenario of Maxwell's daemon, if we can feed his brain with some fresh zero, well, he can keep doing the process and extracting energy. But once he runs out of zero, well, he will run out of work extraction. Yes. Now, the question you probably are not asking yourself is, does randomness really exist? And why I'm saying this is that because, yeah, when we consider the whole universe, we will often say, well, okay, it's a unitary evolution and a pure state, so there's no randomness. But in my model, I don't consider the universe as a whole, but I consider the local part. So when we're tracing out a lot of the universe and just keeping Alice lab, for example, yes, there will be no global randomness, but because of entanglement, there still will be local randomness. So what's more precisely the bounded free energy model? So this is physics-based cryptography. So the bounded free energy model, we will allow the players to do almost everything except erase information. And notably, they will have unbounded computation time. And we will consider that they can work with arbitrarily large states. So a bit like Maxwell daemons, well, we can do a computation on a canister of gas, even if it has a number of avocados of atoms that are moving all around. And if you blink, well, the state has changed a lot, but we will assume that this evolution for the daemon or for the reversible computer is tractable, so that we can keep track of these changes. And the last thing is that we will have that transferring systems between players will also be free. One way to see it is that the players are allowed to take these huge canister of gas that contains a lot of entropy, put them on frictionless card, push them to each other, and trade them arbitrarily low cost. But this physical channel will not necessarily be secure in the case, for example, of secret key establishment. We will consider that maybe Eves is in the middle in the temporal state. For secure multiparty computation, there's no Eves. So as I said, Alice and Bob will be perfect, powerful, and powerful meaning that we can act with unbounded computation time, reversible computers. And we will see that they're not allowed to erase information, and that their starting resources will be in some parameter n, a linear amount of non-randomness, that is, for example, of a string that starts in a pure zero state, and an unbounded amount of memory that starts in a completely random state. So we can see that whenever they need some new memory, they can go in the trash, become some hard drive that is completely random and use it. But if they wanted to erase it, well, this will cost information.
I don't quite understand the drawing there. What is it that is an X on it?
It's the erasure.
Yes. So I got it. Yes.
So in this model, if they want to erase information, they cannot do it. What they can do is they can take their fresh zero and swap them to the thing they want to. So they can use the zero state here as a garbage to put the randomness. But essentially, because they cannot erase information, and they're restricted to this quantity of zero. And these are the honest players, and the malicious players, Alice, Bob, or Eve, when they're malicious, we will consider that they have an exponential quantity of zeros and also an unbounded amount of randomly. And then in this model, what we will show is that there's information theoretic security against these kind of opponents with these honest players. So there is an exponential gap in free energy consumption in the usage of zeros to implement or break. And the basic idea that underlies all of the proof methods for this work is that we will have some adversary which is exponentially bounded. And then at some point we will consider that, for example, they were doing an Eve in the middle attack. They got some state rho E and then they send it out to the next player to Bob. And then we will see that if they can break the security of the scheme, well, it implies that they must also have kept a copy of the state, where a copy in classical formalism just means that they're correlated random variables. In quantum formalism, it means that here it's non-normalized, a quantum state that is in this basis. But the fact that Eve could send a state and keep a copy, if the states are really large, it means that there must have been a large amount of redundancy between both. So what Eve could have done is instead of sending the state to the next player, she could have kept both, do a C0 operation on one, obtain a very large amount of zero that will exceed her bound. And then this also works if they're imperfect copies, but they're close enough. Let's see more how this works. So I don't know how much time. So I'm about halfway.
So you assume Eve is bounded in that sense.
Sorry?
So you assume Eve is bounded in work.
Yeah. It's bound, but exponentially bound compared to honest players that are linearly bound. So I have three protocols that I can present. The first one is secret key establishment. I think it's the most straightforward one. So the idea, you have secret key establishment. Alice and Bob wants to share some one-time pad. Eve is in the middle and wants to learn the one-time pad. And we'll say it's sound if Alice and Bob end up with the same key, and it's private if Eve has absolutely no clue about it. I think that's it. Our conditional mean entropy is negligible. So the protocol will be as follows. Alice takes from our lab an arbitrarily, an exponentially. So the player sets some security value here. And then Alice will take a state that is exponentially large in n from our lab. It will start in a completely random state. And she will samples from this whole distribution, some part of it. So she just generates another random sample of position. At these positions, she looks at the bit. And then she extracts from this a linear size sample. Then she sends the state to Bob. Eve, potentially in the middle, intercepts it and does whatever she wants with it. Bob receives the state or something else that he believes to be the state. Then Bob tells Alice, okay, I've received what I think is the state. Alice reveals the sampling position, but not the value, but just the position at which she found, she registered the secret bit. And then Bob also extracts this information. Then they do some public discussion where they do information reconciliation, which is a process that will correct errors so that they end up with perfect soundness. They end up with the same string. And they do private simplification so that they again take a key about which E might have some information, and that is very long, and make it shorter, but a key about which E has absolutely no information.
Can I ask a question here?
Yeah.
How similar is that protocol to Wooley's bounded storage protocol, like the very first one? I think it has also key agreement there based on bounded storage. Do you know?
Yes, well, it's different because there are states they cannot be exponentially long; they have to be like quadratic.
Yes. Although it's different, and I think the reasoning is different. I think the protocol, the mechanism of the protocol.
Yeah, there's also this very long string in the sky, and that is kind of exponential, I think.
Yeah.
It's just where you.
The analysis is probably different, but the protocol as it works.
But one trick here is that when Bob receives the state at the end, he has the whole thing. So it's easier when he receives when Alice tells him which position, he can look at all the position and gets them. While in this bounded storage thing, he will have had to make the choice of which position to look already before Alice tells him that, because he cannot store all the things.
Yes.
So he will register some position at random, and then Alice will tell him which one were the right one, and then he will discard everything that was not.
But I mean, I asked before, like you said, Eve is only has an exponential bound, so she can just copy the string. If that's the bound.
Yes. So the
bound is maybe half that size or so. So this quantity exceeds Eve's.
yeah, exactly. So then it was that there was a precise
it's
bound.
half, then we have two Eves. They call it back the bound. I mean, it's sub-exponential bound.
Yeah, we can do it with a sub-exponential bound or precise
I
exponential.
thought the same before. Maybe it would be better to say that.
One thing that's kind of funny here is that between step 3 and 4, there's no need for Bob to tell Alice and Bob to check whether they actually share the same key. So the thing will be secure even if they have not.
Well, no, because the eavesdropper could just be malicious and randomize everything. Will not get a key, but will prevent.
Yeah, then it will be secret, but it will not be sound. I mean, they will not share the same key.
What I mean is that you need to check that the string is the same, so that you know if that is.
Yeah, at the end of information reconciliation. Yeah, you're right. Yes.
Could you say a bit more precisely what means to sample?
Yes. So Alice, and in the first step, she has generated some random position, and then she has copied the bit that is in the state at those random positions.
So Alice already has access to like a random sequence of positions within the exponential string.
Yes, exactly.
That means that in step 3, she has to communicate all those positions.
Yeah. Yeah, and this set of position could be, for example, just the beginning of the exponential state. She just take a little part and keep it.
That's roughly n squared bits, right? If you sum a string of length n, how is an exponential string?
Be approximately n log, yeah, n squared, exactly.
Is that okay? Because I thought the other symbol were restricted to like the square root of n.
Yes, actually, it's key n, where the n is not the length of the message; it's the security parameter.
And the length of the string of key you want.
Yeah.
So if Bob is sampling randomly, does that mean that the overlap they get is exponentially small?
No, but Bob doesn't sample randomly. He samples from the position that Alice tells him in step 3. So he waits with the state, and then he will sample from from the position that it gets from Alice.
But okay, this may be the reply to the question I asked before, because I think in Willis protocol, that's exactly what they do. They both sample randomly from a big amount of data, and then they look for the overlap.
Yes.
Small,
They already share some random. They have some
Willie
small
Mao,
shared
the
randomness,
bounded
and
storage
then-
model.
Stefan, I
Sorry?
think in that protocol, they already have some shared randomness, which then points to some point in this long string that passes by, and then they take it from there on, and they can extend to their log and shared random bits to linear or whatever.
So this is
To have this synchronization, to not have this synchronization.
What was the purpose for Edison above to make a copy of what he measured? It looks like they have twice the same thing.
Yeah, for Bob, it's not important. For Alice, it's important because she's going to send the state. So if she didn't make a copy, well, she forgot the key.
No, I forget. She keeps in her memory what she read. Needs to keep the bits and the positions.
Yes, exactly.
But why does she keep two copies of the bits?
Oh, these are irrelevant. Yes.
I think she makes.
No, but the drawing is bad. It should be two different.
Why two? Why not just one?
It should be just one. Yeah.
But she has, at some point, she needs to have two copies because one she sends and one she keeps.
Not here.
Sorry?
Maybe before we keep it down here.
Just keeps the bits of.
No. She
No,
doesn't.
the drawing here, there's two copies and
There's no reason.
there's no reason. No. Yeah, there's absolutely no reason. I just thought that 5 was too short for a key, so I put 10.
You put then and copy the same thing twice.
Yes.
Can I ask another question? Like, is it reasonable to assume that they can transfer this exponential amount of information? Because like, then in particular, they need to store it, and you're assuming that for Eve, it's hard to store so much.
Yeah, so to transfer it, they can do it with reversible computing. For example, if they put the thing in a cart with no friction and you push it, the information is only stored ever in one place. So you never need to copy it or to break the energy bound.
So somehow, I guess you were saying that transferring is cheaper than copying.
Yes. Yeah, because transfer is a swap and the swap is reversibly it's logically reversible. So possible to do it thermodynamically reversible using the logic in this. So yeah, so this will be sound. The question is it private? No, I'm not sure I want to do the proof. I will do it. I will give a sketch of the proof. So the idea is that we start with the whole state. Then they do some sampling. And from the sampling, they will do information reconciliation and private simplification to obtain the final key. So what the condition that we will say it's private, it's if at the last step, the key is undistinguishable from perfect, meaning that it's completely independent from Eve knowledge. This can be seen as the statistical distance, and that needs to be smaller than any inverse polynomial in the security parameter. Here the n has become nu. So this is the target. We want to obtain this. And so I'm going to do it in backward. To obtain this, one sufficient condition is to have enough min entropy for the raw key here, and then do universal hashing, meaning private simplification, in some way to end up with a key. So what you want is more min entropy in this than the length of the key here. So now what we want is to bound the min entropy of this raw key given Eve's knowledge, which is this quantity. And this will be done by sampling. So essentially, it's a sampling game where we ask Eve to guess the whole key. And then we look at what's our probability to win the whole key. And we use some theorem that says that the quantity of mean entropy in this whole key divided by the length of this key is the same as the quantity of mean entropy in the raw key divided by the length of the raw key. What this means is that when we sample the quantity of mean entropy of E, the fraction in the whole is proportional, corresponds to the fraction in the raw key. And finally, we use some physical limitation to bound this. Or the physical limitation is that if this was broken, it will mean that E is equal to this compression of this graph. So yeah, this is might be too technical for one slide, but I would like to present the.
Can I ask something about this two universal hashing? How do you actually prove something there? Because I mean, what is is it the quantum state or is it because this requires a proof. The Renatus thesis he does this, for instance, if he uses quantum sign information. But here, what kind of sign information are you considering?
Yeah, there's two ways to make the model. Either you consider that everything is classical, and then you consider classical set information, or you consider your quantum and then you use some.
Right, but in your case, what is it? What are these particles? What is this canister of gas?
If I may, the Oblivious transfer protocol is so much more interesting. It would be very sad if we didn't have time for it. So I really recommend that you go on.
But I think this was just a concept.
Yeah, but then it's not clear if it falls.
Yeah, I know, but time is running out. And OT is really, really nice. And if you don't have time to see it, it's very sad. My opinion. You're the speaker, you do what you want.
Yeah. So secure multivariate computation. You have Alice and Bob, they don't trust each other. They see some random inputs, A and B, and they want Bob to be able to compute the function of A and B. But Alice doesn't want to tell Bob more than what he will learn by learning f of A and B. And Bob doesn't want to tell Alice anything. And the one example is, yeah, they want to flip a coin. Or they want to pick who is white in chess. And then the interesting thing about picking who is white in chess is that it functions in two ways. The first is you do a commitment and a rebuild, and then you use this as a primitive to build flipping a coin. But another example of a primitive is Oblivious transfer. And what's interesting is it seems a bit arbitrary, but it's actually universal as a primitive for secure multivariate computation, meaning that if you can do this in a way that is can be composed, then it's you can do any secure multivariate computation in a secure way. If it's secure and composable, then it can be used to make any secure multivariate computation secure. And Oblivious transfer, how it works in the 1-2 version. Alice sent 2 messages to Bob. Well, 2 envelopes, and then she tells Bob, well, please only open one. And then Bob said, okay, I'm going to open only one, but don't look at which one I pick. And now they want to implement this, but instead of saying please, they want to be sure that it cannot be cheated. And then it will be sound if the message that Bob picks corresponds to the one that Alice sent. So, and it will be secure for the sender if Bob can only open one of them, gain information about one of them at a time. And it will be secure for the receiver if Alice cannot learn which message Bob. And secure multivariate computation cannot be made secure with quantum mechanics or special relativity. or both. It can be made in some bounded storage model, and it can be made in this bounded free energy model. And here's the protocol. So each box here represents some exponentially large, you wouldn't see it, but exponentially large state that Alice is going to send to Bob. So she has two, K1 and K2. And essentially, later, the first cube is going to be needed to open the first message, and the second cube is going to be needed to open the second message. I explain more how this works. So the first step is Alice is going to generate some random position and then samples these very large state at these random position to extract a key 1 for the first one and a key 2 for the second one. She samples them on the same position. And then she remembers the position and she remembers the values. Then she sends these two cubes to Bob in some thermodynamically reversible way. Bob received the two states. And then he will, in the honest version, he will choose one of the two states, and he will return the XOR of the other two. So Bob starts here, and let's say that he wants to keep K2. What he's going to do is going to C0 K2 into K1. He will be left with K1 XOR K2 and K2. And then he will send back the other state, this state. And if he had chosen the first message, he could have kept K1 and still send K1 XOR K2. And what's nice is that we already see that no matter what Bob's choice is, he's going to send back exactly the same state. Then upon receiving K1 XOR K2.
Can I ask a question? So this XOR is also not very expensive to do?
Yes, it's logically reversible.
Sure, but you're doing the right? I can sampling from a big thing, fine. Maybe sending it around.
Time, but it costs money.
But the
Oh, good perspective.
Yes, I mean, it's completely far-fetched, but we're following the rules that we set up. And it's a logically reversible operation, so why not?
Well, because it will take a lot of time.
I mean, maybe it can be done in parallel.
It's a logically reversible operation if you keep one copy. One of the two.
Yeah, it's logically reversible if you keep K2 or K1. And the principle is that in both of them, when you combine these two states, you have exactly the same information content and originally where you have K1. So then what Alice does is she takes her samples here, K1 and K2, she looks at the position and see if the position here are K1 plus K2.
I think you didn't, maybe you said it, but I didn't hear it. That initially, when she sampled the two big things, she sampled them in the same positions.
Yes, I said it.
Is that it? Sorry.
And in the end, what Alice does, she will publish M1 plus here it's the notation is not good, but she publishes the hash of the key that she extracted here. XOR, so it generates a one-time pad, and then XOR with M1, and M2 XORed with a one-time pad that has been generated through a hash of the second key, as well as the sampling position. And then Bob will look. And then now that Bob knows the position, he will look at his state. He will extract key2. From key2, he will generate the hash, that is the one-time pad, and extract the second message. And he has sent back all information that he had about K1, so he has forgotten it. So he will know absolutely nothing about M1, so K1. So this is sound. It's secure for the receiver because its behavior is completely symmetric in its choice from the point of view of Alice. And it's also secure for sender. And the reason is that if we consider an attack where Bob tried to gain information about both messages, because of private simplification and this hash procedure here, it will mean that he have kept most of the information in K1 and most of the information in K2. And if he had most of the information in both, then he couldn't have sent a copy of K1 plus K2 because there's a lot of redundancy in these three states. So essentially, K1 is needed to open the first, to learn anything about the first message, and K2 is needed to learn anything about the second message. And if Bob learns something about both messages at the same time, it means that he has both states or something close to both states, as well as Alice here has done the verification that this is the right state. Then it means that there's a lot of redundancy and Bob will have extracted 0, extracted free energy out of the system. So this is for the OT protocol.
We use entropy splitting for this, you know?
No, I don't know where to control that. What comes out of this is it's imposing this free energy bound gives a flavor of no cloning, where I call it a thermodynamical almost no cloning theorem. And the idea is that with the free energy bound, it's impossible for the players to copy exponentially large state at all. I mean, it's impossible to make another copy of this, but they can make small samples. So they can take some samples of this large state and copy them as many times as they want. But they cannot make bottom. In expectation, they cannot copy the whole thing. Otherwise, it will become reversible and break the point. And this comes in contrast with, for example, quantum mechanics for monogamy of entanglement or special relativity, monogamy of the PR boxes, where here the information can be at 2 places, at most exactly 2 places at the same time. And here in expectation, information is exactly at 1 place at the same time. And one good example of why this gives new, this allows new primitive like Oblivious transfer. It also allows secure positioning. And the idea of secure positioning, usually we'll have two verifiers and a prover in the middle. We want to certify that the prover is really at this position. And this is impossible to do with quantum mechanics and or special relativity. But then it's going to be possible in this model using the free energy bounded model plus special relativity. And I'll just present the protocol. So this is the akin version of the protocol. So we have 2 verifiers, and the first verifier will draw from his lab 2 very large state, completely random, B and S. And then he will use S as a seed to compute a universal, to select a hash function from the 2 universal family. And from this, he will hash the value of the string that is encoded. Then the verifier will send to the prover this B state in the preparation phase. Now in the test phase, in the interaction, both verifier will send a random bit at the same time to the prover. And the prover, depending on the parity of the bit, will either send this state to the verifier 2 or to the verifier 1. And since the information can only be at one place at the same time, we will have that. Yes, okay. And what they're going to do is when the verifier receives the state from Alice, the verifier will get together and compute the new hash value. So this is the hash value at the end, and this was the hash value at the beginning. And if the two hash values are the same, it means that the state is the same. And we can prove that the probability that Eve's full the verifier is 1/2 because she has basically to commit to a verifier and hope that the parity is good. So if we make sure that Alice answers as soon as she receives the bit, and we do it in parallel many times, then we can be sure that Alice is exactly in the middle. And one fun thing of using these hash function is that we're not restricted to exponential size systems. So we can have some even more far-fetched scenario where the size of the system scales as the Ackermann function. And then we have an Ackermann gap between.
Sorry, I didn't understand the protocol, but does it mean that this verifier in the middle, sorry, the prover in the middle needs to XOR like these big boxes together?
No,
Maybe it's obvious for some of us, but maybe not for all of us. What is the purpose of position verification? You didn't say what you're trying to achieve. Someone doesn't know the conundrum of position verification. Has no clue what you're doing.
Yeah, the purpose is to verify that the prover is exactly in.
Right, an attack would be that you have, for instance, two bad people on each side who would try to spoof this and couldn't get out.
Exactly. So we want to prove that the prover is exactly in the middle, and it's not simulatable. It cannot be simulated by agents of the prover being, for example, one very close to the verifier 1 and the other close to the verifier 2, or 2 in the middle, or there's no configuration of provers that can together prove that they are that they have one agent in the middle if there's not true one agent in the middle. And as for the question, does the prover here needs to do the XOR? Well, A and B here are 1 bit. So yes.
Do you actually need the A? Can't you just send a random bit from the verifier 2 and the box from A?
Then send a bit, he sends back B. The whole system B is sent back.
The small b, a random bit will determine which way you send it.
Oh,
Yeah, because if it was only the verifier 2 that sent a bit, the prover could be very close to the verifier 2.
Yeah, but you have to wait for the box to arrive. So the box comes.
Oh, but the box was pre-shared. It was a preparation phase.
Oh, okay, but you could send the box if it travels at the speed of light, which I guess in your form is not.
It's an exponentially long thing. So
Okay, now then it doesn't.
cannot go. It's not the whole thing.
Are you sure?
It's separately the whole thing.
All right. So the boxes cannot travel at the speed of light, according to Harry's argument.
Well, here it needs to. But there's another version of this protocol where the box doesn't travel at the speed of light, but the box is restricted to exponential steps.
So why is it secure?
It's secure because
I mean, we need to see that, right? I mean, now we have to show that it cannot be attacked by, say, an Alice in a box close to verifier 1 and verifier 2. that, that have an unbounded amount of entanglement.
Yes, the idea is that if they had, we cannot do teleportation in this model because information can only be at one specific spot. So their entanglement relies on correlations that are on the entanglement attack relies on two agents being correlated on well, being quantum correlated, but this means that they are at least classically correlated. But if they had correlation on very large states, they could get together and undo the correlation and get a blank state, and from this extract work.
So what goes wrong with the normal teleportation attack? Say the port-based teleportation attack.
Yes, it breaks the free energy bound. Because in this model, they are not allowed to share this much amount of entanglement because entanglement is a pure state, and a pure state can be transformed with at no energy cost into a completely zero state. And this, if they had exponentially large maximally entangled state, they could transform this into maximally large zero state and extract work using Saylor's engine, Maxwell's theorem.
I'm sure I buy that. I mean, as long as they may return the entanglement in the end, it should be fine. They don't use up too much of it, it should be fine.
Maybe return it. So if in the middle they have access to unlimited free energy, but at the end in the model they are not allowed at any point in time to break the energy bound. So they can take a loan of free energy to later return it. Yeah, as a catalyst.
But you said that you don't really need this box to be set at the speed of light. Of course, in the setup state, it doesn't matter. But when you want to prove where you are, you really have to send it at the speed of light currently, which may be something difficult for a box. For a photon, it's sort of, even for a photon, it's hard and it's really possible on fiber. By the empty space, you could. But to send a box at the speed of light is a little bit of a problem.
Yeah, so instead of doing this hashing, they could do a sample of position. And then in the end, Alice keeps the whole box and she just sends a symbol of position.
But then she can send that, now that's classical information. And that can be sent to speed of light.
Okay, so in this variant, this box can be with a frictionless card sent extremely slowly to the prober for later use, and then at the beginning of the protocol, then we start with fast photons. So it would be possible, to put this in a freezer, for example. If it's not easy to send. So I'm running out of time, so I will talk about the practical considerations. So the most realistic thing about this is having perfect reversible computers.
What's realistic?
One big problem is that Boltzmann constant is so small that the states that we will have to actually use will need to be really large for any free energy bound to be meaningful. And one good example is if you take a canister of gas, it contains a lot of entropy. And then if you want to, for example, compress it halfway, well, it's not so hard. And lastly, in this protocol, we were asking this box to be sent at the speed of light. this could be a bit delayed, but yeah. On the other side, if we have that, we look at the universe as a universe that is leaking information, in the sense that sometimes you have an entangled pair of unhurt, and then a photon goes into space and there's no mirror and the photon just keep going and never come back. Then this information leakage will mean that if we look at if we trace out this photon that will never come back, the entropy of the universe is increasing. And with increasing time in this model, the total free energy of the universe will go down and down and down, and until the heat death. And in a way, we could say that, yeah, this is practical cryptography for pre-heat death. And it was nice to study this to think a bit about the physical principle. And one very interesting fact is that the security of these protocols were relying on the fact that we could sample the mean entropy of a big state, meaning that the mean entropy on the small samples is representative of the mean entropy on the whole. And this is true for classical information, and it's true for quantum information, but it doesn't have to be. So we could think of a weird model where we will have boxes that, for example, you can encode an exponential amount of information into a box. But then when you want to retrieve, you will have to select exactly one bit and then the box disappears. And if the cost to reset this box could be set by Landauer's principle to be the amount of information that you can retrieve and then that you can put in. So in this kind of thermodynamics, non-contextuality or contextuality, we will be able to break the protocol that I presented without violating Landauer's principle, without violating the second law of thermodynamics. So while my model was agnostic as whether we wanted to talk about classical or quantum model, it did rely on this fact, thermodynamics, not contextual. And this is what I thought was the most interesting surprise of this model, after the fact that it was actually possible. So in summary, I've started to motivate this work. Then I've talked about this extreme framework of reversible computing, the bounded free energy model, and then some cryptographic construction. I hope you enjoy.